President Obama hosts world leaders at the G-20 summit today in Pittsburgh. Bloomberg's Peter Cook is there with Dan Price, who helped President Bush navigate the meetings in Washington last fall. Peter.
Deirdre, thanks very much. Dan Price was an assistant to the president for international economic affairs under President Bush. He's now a senior partner at Sidley, Austin, and he's here for this G20 summit to help us make sense of what's going to play out here over the next 2 days. Dan, first of all, thank you for the time. Appreciate you joining us. And you helped organize the first G20 summit back in November when this crisis first started. What do you make of this summit? What do you think is going to get accomplished?
Well, there are three critical issues on the agenda, I think. The first is carrying forward a program of convergent as opposed to fragmented regulatory reform. The second is the U.S. initiative to formulate a blueprint for sustainable economic growth that deals with the global imbalances. And the third critical issue, as far as I'm concerned, and a number of the developing countries are concerned, is fighting protectionism.
All right, let's talk about the first one on that list, regulatory reform. Much has been made over the last year by the G20's commitment to harmonize regulation around the world, prevent this kind of crisis from happening again. Yet there have been questions about whether or not there can be substantive agreement on some of these issues. For example, capital standards, leverage requirements. What's your sense? Are they going to leave here with specific numbers in mind for banks around the world?
Well, it's not the job of leaders to agree specific numbers for capital requirements or liquidity standards. But what they can do is provide the needed political impetus to carry forward reform that results in consistent rather than inconsistent regulations. And I've got to say, one of the distractions to achieving that is this fixation on numerical caps or ratios for bonuses. Fortunately, the Obama administration has pushed back against that and I think is achieving consensus around a set of principles to discourage excessive risk-taking, to align incentives with longer-term performance, rather than to kind of mechanically reach for some ratio.
We had the Germans, the French, President Sarkozy pushing hard for specific caps on banker bonuses. That is, in a public, still upset about financial crisis, still a very hot topic in this country as well. Yet the Obama administration, as you say, not going as far as the French and Germans. Isn't there a potential political risk to that?
Well, you know, there may be, but I think the Obama administration has taken a very sensible approach. What they've said is, look, in America, we don't fix salaries. Rather, we come up with rules of the road. And the rules of the road that they are promoting is to ensure that as compensation goes up, a higher proportion is paid in equity, to ensure that it's paid out over the long term, to ensure that if performance deteriorates, that there is clawback, and to do away with multi-year bonuses. That, in my view, is a sensible approach.
All right, Dan, we've got to leave our discussion right there. Thank you very much for joining us this morning here on Bloomberg. Deirdre, going to send it back to you in New York.
Peter, thanks so much.